All right. Sorry, everybody. I don't know if that movie's going to stream for me or not. I do have something else to talk about, though. I did talk about it in my last live, but I actually wanted to spend a little more time on it. So we'll let people catch up here, and then we'll get going on that. Appreciate it, everybody, for jumping over. So I've been noticing a lot of channels on YouTube are talking about, still kind of, chasing the drug dealer connections and, looking at the roommates as being accomplices in the crime. I'm curious to hear everybody's thoughts on that and where you are as far as that goes. Do you really think that there is something there that is being overlooked by law enforcement, including the FBI? Or do you think those are rumors? Where does everybody stand on kind of the drug rumors or just rumors in general of even there being maybe a second person involved, an accomplice of Bryan's? What does everybody think about that? And if you do think, maybe there was an accomplice or any drug connections or anything that would be related to the actual murders, explain it a little bit in the chat. What your theory is, so we can talk about it. So hopefully you guys can hear me now. Yeah, just rumors says the original Alexa. No, it's okay, Caroline. If you have a different view, I mean, we're here to discuss it. Don't feel like you can't. It's okay, and it's great if you're kind of there's less people, of course, who I think are going to argue for Bryan's innocence and things like that. So it's okay, to look at it from a different angle. Yeah, so that's a good point, Pink. I think they're rumors as well, but they could definitely be leveraged in the defense, creating doubt. They're probably going to. I think they're going to have to come up with a focused defense, though. I don't think they can jump around. I don't think they can use a drug connection as maybe somebody else potentially committing the crime, and then also use some other reason like Bryan was in the area shopping, right? They're gonna have to stick with whatever story, whatever angle they go with. They're gonna have to back up whatever their defense is. It's gonna have layers, right, supporting it. I don't think they can just kind of throw out things. So for example, if they go with a drug connection, I mean, they're going to have some names, right? And have to really have something to support what they're saying. I don't think a jury is just going to let Bryan's attorney stand up and say, well, yeah, it's possible they were selling drugs out of the house, so it's possible that another person came to the home to rob them and attack them. I think they're going to have to really back that up with a little bit more. Yeah, Angel. Yeah, making up new suspects. There's a lot of speculation out there. I'm really surprised. Yeah, like there was one channel I came across today, and it was saying how it was talking about like new information about Dylan. And I don't I just don't understand. The angle of trying to connect Dylan and Bethany to the crime. Whether there was some drug use. I mean, they're college students. It's very possible there was some drug use at some point going on in the house, and some passing around of drugs, of course. But it doesn't mean it's connected to the murders. And so I was just it's just interesting to me that they're still kind of talking about this, um, but it really wasn't anything new. You know, it was just kind of a rehash of the rumors that had been going around long ago. So it was just strange to me. Yeah, HK, not at the campsite. Yeah, FBI are still looking at it, which is good. They should continue to look at it. Yeah, Sasha, I agree with that. I think the defense has to be really careful with whatever strategy they use, because if they're going to connect Bryan to the house in some way, well, that opens up a whole door of having to explain away other things, right? You're connecting him to the victims. So the defense is going to have to determine if they're going to completely say Bryan had nothing to do with them, or was there a connection, and then is their story going to kind of go along with that? Now, he was following them on Instagram. He's aware of cell phone pings. The defense is aware of cell phone pings placing him in the area. So they could very well go with a defense that puts him in some sort of connection or relationship with the victims, whether it was courting one of the victims for a date, or they could even they could claim that one of the victims invited him over, potentially at some point. The victims aren't around to defend themselves in that scenario. If he were to say, well, yeah, I was dating one of the victims and I went over there a bunch of times, that's why my cell phone pinged over there. But again, that ties him to the victims, and now you're even more of a suspect in some ways, right? They always look at the closest people first. So I don't know. I don't know if they're going to go with, yeah, he knew him, or or if they're going to go with, no, he had nothing to do with them whatsoever. He was in Moscow to go shopping. The shopping's better there. He was there for other reasons, and this is all just a big mix-up, right? More than one killer, Melly says. Interesting. So yeah, I've heard that as well. I've heard that discussion about an accomplice, but the thing that gives me a hard time with that is, there hasn't really been any mention of it in any of the official documents, and that's the best thing we have to go off of, is the official legal documents that we have access to, and there really hasn't been any mention at all of an accomplice. So as far as law enforcement's angle, it doesn't sound like there is a second person. Now, if it's an unknown second person, that would be interesting, because that would mean that law enforcement has overlooked this person. They haven't connected them to Bryan. They haven't they haven't figured it out yet, which you would think with all of this digital evidence they would have. Arlene says that she thinks he did it alone. He wasn't good at making friends. Finding somebody to trust enough to do that type of crime. It does happen. There are times where two people will come together and commit horrible crimes, but it is rare for sure. Yeah, two killers means more DNA evidence. Of course, harder to keep it clean. And we have an eyewitness seeing one person leaving. I don't think we can discount. I mean, unless you're just going to ignore Dylan's testimony or her statement to law enforcement about seeing the suspect leave. She didn't say she saw two. She saw one. Yeah, Caroline, I do think they had Bryan as a suspect early on, but yeah, I love how you were looking at Chief Fry's statements around that time. That's a great idea to go back and look at even some news articles, before and right after that time, to see if there's, you want to see what was going on with the Kohberger case at that same time. And it's so interesting how the very same day Bryan and his dad were pulled over, that was unfolding, right? The early morning hours when most likely Bryan and his dad were on the road. that all that stuff was happening right after they left. So the timing is very suspect, and I think that is part of why the Kopaka case jumps out to us, is it's the close proximity and then the timing of it after the fact that we learned of when Bryan was pulled over on the 15th. At the time, we didn't know, right, that Bryan was on the road. We didn't know who Bryan was at the time. And then, a couple weeks later, we find out. But on that same day, we later learned where Bryan was. He was on the highway heading back to Pennsylvania talking about that very incident. Melly says the defense is going to blow their minds. They might have something big, yeah. Now, the thing is, though, Melly, is they did respond here recently that they don't have an alibi prepared, and they haven't really prepared their defense yet because they haven't been able to get through all of the evidence, which is a little bit strange to me, because if you have an innocent man, he shouldn't have to explain away too much, right? They shouldn't need to see all of the evidence in order to explain his innocence. Of course, they want to see the evidence to prepare their defense. That's the legal process here. But if Bryan is really innocent, why is the defense holding back his alibi if it's not solid? Okay, so it must not be a solid alibi if you think about that. So his alibi, he may have told Ann Taylor, you know what, I was at home asleep. Well, that's not going to do it, right? He's going to, he could say that, but is that going to help his case or not? But I just think it's interesting that they've admitted that they don't have a defense yet. Well, how do you not have a defense of an innocent man if he's innocent? Melly, Prophetic Jones, it's tied to some type of ritual. Now, that's the scary side of this, when you start looking at other cases as well across the country that are similar to Bryan's, or even not. The Oregon situation right now with these women turning up. Honey Badger, let me try it again here. I'll try the movie, and it just seemed like it was causing my stream to freeze. So I think I'm just gonna, let the chat go for now, and then I'll try the movie here in the next day or two. Let me do a test run of the movie, though. I'm gonna try running it through and play around with the settings, because I don't want to waste everybody's time with it freezing up. So we'll hang out here for a bit and chat about the case, and then we'll run that movie here in the here in the next couple of days once I can get it figured out. Yeah, HK, I agree. I'm in the camp that I think they have the right guy. I think he acted alone, but it's okay. I think to continue to look at it from a different perspective. We need people to do that, look at it from the other side, because it keeps us honest either way. I'm really surprised. Yeah, Honey Badger, I think that it because the same thing happened when I tried to play the court TV broadcast. It was hourglassing. So I'll mess with my settings and see if I can figure it out. But yeah, some of that stuff just disappears, Angel. Those early on things that we were talking about. Remember, for so long we didn't have a suspect, and we had all the, there were all the boyfriends, being talked about. There were these people at the food truck. There was all these, remember, this case has been quite a wild ride from the very beginning, from no suspects, thinking it was somebody close to the victims, and then remember that day when we all woke up and it was like, whoa, they arrested this guy, Bryan Kohberger. That day we learned who he was. And remember how relieved everybody was back then, right? Remember that? It was kind of like people were afraid in Moscow. There was this person out there. They didn't know who it was. And then when they caught the person, it was like, oh, this kind of sense of relief. And then all this information was coming out about Bryan more and more, right? And everybody was learning about him. And then everything all of a sudden took this weird turn where, people started kind of, saying he was innocent and, kind of doubting it more. So it's just been a really interesting case all around from the beginning up to where we are now. So Angel, now that is possible, a dark-haired woman. I do know that Bryan did share an office at WSU with a woman who had dark hair who fits that description. So it's very possible that he may have, yep, Caroline, yeah, his lab partner, potentially, they could have carpooled. Melly, you say that you think maybe he'll try to claim that um, say it was somebody else, basically. Yeah, that's possible, Sasha. Yeah, with Brent, we don't know what triggered him, and I do have questions about that whole incident. From all of the description of Brent Kopaka, he was a really nice guy and very friendly. He wasn't a violent person toward his friends or anything like that, despite having PTSD. And they were saying how he was holding his roommates hostage, in this whole incident, threatening his roommates, and it just didn't seem to fit his character. That was another strange part of it. And I really think it's weird that we have not heard the 911 call that was made reporting the incident. I'm curious to hear that. So Caroline, yeah, so Kopaka talking to Chief Fry. Now, if that's true, it is possible. So it's possible Brent Kopaka could have been questioned in the investigation, and it is possible there could be a connection in some way. We don't know. I do have a video, and I've thought about it, and I was looking into Brent to try to see if there could be a connection there. And for the most part, I think it's maybe possible Brent could have sold Bryan the knife at most if there's like an actual connection to the murder. It's possible Brent maybe just knew Bryan, maybe crossed paths with him, and at some point law enforcement wanted to talk to him. He had a white Elantra, is reported, so they may have been investigating white Elantras that lived in Pullman, because remember they had video footage of the car coming from that place, that area. So in their investigation, that could have led them to Brent Kopaka as well. It is very curious, though. So the UPS trucks, yeah. So they did submit a warrant requesting UPS video footage, and it is possible that a truck passed by and saw something. Yeah, Alexa, I think it could be one of those things where it just coincidence. It happened to happen close by, the timing of it, and then it's reinforced right with the traffic stop. With those traffic stops, and Bryan and his dad discussing it's almost like it adds a connection to the two cases. But I still want to know more about the Brent Kopaka case. It would not surprise me if they didn't look at him at some point. But even if they didn't, I'd like to learn more about what happened there, what kind of caused him to react the way he did, and I would like to hear that 911 call and how it unfolded completely. I would imagine there's some body cam footage out there also. I doubt we're going to see that, but I'd imagine there is some body cam footage. Yeah, the roommates were not harmed. So you hear that there were these threats, and then they were fine. So what's the real story there? No, I think Angel, with the suspect vehicle one. So these are just terms that they use as a standard in their legal explanation of in the affidavit explaining it. So I think with suspect vehicle one, that's how they've labeled the vehicle is suspect vehicle 1. If they wanted to, they could have called it suspect vehicle 5. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's 5. I mean, if there were 5, they would number them in order, suspect vehicle 1, suspect vehicle 2. If they were kind of if they had multiple vehicles on camera, it is possible that they did have multiple vehicles on camera. There is a statement in the affidavit that says that the officer who is familiar with the area said that in his experience, very few cars travel in the area. And then they said that on camera around the times when Bryan's car or when the white Elantra was captured on video, it says in the affidavit very few other vehicles are seen at this time in the area. So there were some other vehicles, and I'm guessing that they looked at those vehicles as well. Yeah, I think housewife, those are probably trolls. Now, I did look at his obituary way back when I made a video about Brent Kopaka, and those comments were not in there. I did read through that obituary, and there was nothing in there from Bryan or Emma Bailey back then, so I'm pretty sure somebody circled back. See, and this is where you got to be really careful. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of channels out there that are kind of chasing that stuff and rehashing it. And that's fine if, it's entertaining, right? And it's fun to kind of think, what if and speculate. I get it, but I just have a hard time with that without seeing something that leads us there. I feel really bad, to be honest. I feel bad if I were to say, well, yeah, I think Dylan was selling drugs and she's responsible, without having something there legally pointing to that. At least with, Bryan, we're talking about Bryan. We have his DNA. He's being held no bail. There's things supporting him being the perpetrator here, and so we're exploring that in the legal documents. I just have a really hard time with just saying, well, yeah, some random lady called in from Moscow and said her daughter went to school with a friend who knew somebody who said they knew Bryan, and said they were selling drugs out of the house. And it's like, okay, well, I don't believe that, right? Show me something show me just something in the legal documents where they even investigated something like that, right? Everything has been pretty clean, from what we've heard that was going on. I'm sure there was some normal college drug use, but I just have a hard time with, blaming somebody like that without evidence towards them. Melly, yeah, I would be ashamed too if I were Bryan. I think I would be ashamed sitting there, guilty. I think if I think he's guilty, and I think there's some shame for what he did. Yeah, Brent was a war hero. He, believe he had was given the Purple Heart as well. Yeah, I think there probably was other cars in the area. Um, I think that I think their investigation early on, especially, they were looking at everybody, and then I think once they found Bryan, and then they started looking into Bryan, um, and seeing the connections and the evidence and all of those things, then they started focusing more and more on him. But early on, I do think they were looking all over. I think they were looking even at like the Jacks. They probably looked at those food truck people. All of those people at some point were being investigated. What's up, Jan? So I'm really surprised that we're not hearing more talk about that photo of Bryan with the Handmaid's Tale. Did everybody? Um, I asked this on my live the other night. Who had seen that image? the image of Bryan at that conference at the school there where the author of The Handmaid's Tale was there. So really quick, I do want to show this one more time, and let me see where which one is it? It's going to be, here we go. So this image here, and there's some other images I found actually of Bryan attending this seminar or class or Q&A or whatever it was. So you can see here, here's another angle. Somebody was saying the other night that the one image was fake, but I did some more research and I did find that there are additional images that were taken of Bryan here at this thing. So here's some more of those. I'll let those run. So here's the first one that we talked about, and you can see he's holding the book there, The Handmaid's Tale. And but real quick in the chat, if you don't mind, everyone, just put a 1 if you are familiar with The Handmaid's Tale and have heard about Bryan being at this seminar, or if it's this is new to you. But I really think there's some significance here, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about this. Yep, Pink recalls it. Indy. Good. Okay, so everybody's pretty familiar with this. It's fairly new. Came out a couple days ago. Definitely check that out, Harlot. Yeah, okay, good. So everybody's familiar with this. So HK says, why would he go to a girly book seminar, right? Yeah. So Sasha, yeah, so The Handmaid's Tale, just a brief overview. It's a book that was written in 1985. And here, actually, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up, and I'll show you a quick overview of it. But it was a book, and it's describing essentially a future where women are suppressed, and the men in this culture are kind of in charge of everything, but there's some really disturbing relationships between the men and the women in this kind of story where, like, a man will be married to a woman, but then they'll have these other women who are the ones who bear the children. And so there's these kind of really awkward, it's called a ceremony in this book that entails the wife of the person and then what's called a handmaid, being together, and then this is how they conceive children. But it's really disturbing because of the strange connection, in my opinion, to the way the victims were found with Kaylee and Maddie. So let me go ahead and I'll pull up the explanation, and we won't go too far into it, but I did want to just share this a little bit more. So just real quick here, it's a futuristic dystopian novel. It was written by Margaret Atwood, and so essentially it's a future state, and they've turned the United States into what's called the Republic of Gilead. And in this new society, basically, women are classed socially, and they're required to follow this really strict dress code. They're ranked, based, kind of like, it's almost like a military, like ranking. And then you have the commanders, who are the high-ranking men, and so their wives would wear blue. The handmaids would wear red with white bonnets, and then they have different colors as well that different people would wear to kind of signify what their role was. And so you had also, you had women who maybe were older, who were no longer handmaids, who then would, help, the newer handmaids, kind of in a supportive role, and this whole kind of structure there. But the thing that, without going too far into the book, it's just so you can't explain it all here in a quick video. I definitely would recommend reading it. I'm going to. But it definitely is a book that I think somebody who had very strong views against women could maybe admire that kind of type of society. It's also a book that where if you were, I guess kind of a feminist, right? It supports, the, women standing up and being strong. And so, either way, it's a very polarizing book. So there's a lot to it. So I would just recommend, looking into it yourself. But the thing I wanted to talk about with this story is the thing called the ceremony that takes place in this book. And so let me find it here. So the ceremony is a non-marital sexual act sanctioned for reproduction. The ritual requires the handmaid to lie on her back between the legs of the wife during the sex act as if they were one person. The wife has to invite the handmaid to share her power this way. Many wives consider this humiliating and offensive. And so this is a ceremony that takes place in the book. And so I'll show you here. This is you'll see here in this slideshow some images of a kind of a reenactment of that ceremony. So when we talk about like Kaylee and Maddie and the way that they were both found in the same bed, we don't know if they were sleeping in the same bed or if they were forced into the room together or into the same bed. So you can see here in the image, this is kind of what I described there. But it's disturbing to me, right, that we've wondered all this time why they were found in the same bed, and so could there be some sort of weird fantasy connection or something like that, with the Handmaid's Tale? I mean, Bryan was a fan enough of the book to go to this seminar for whatever reason. He's sitting front row with her. So it I don't know how much does he like that book, and then you see this kind of depiction in that book of this dominance situation where you have two women forced to do this, and then we find there's Maddie and Kaylee in the same bed. So just was bothersome to me when I saw that connection, and I'm really surprised that more people aren't kind of pointing that out. So yeah, it is, Sasha. It's hard to even talk about. It's like it's uncomfortable explaining it because you can't even really say a lot of what takes place. But yeah, so I think there was a movie or a show or something like that. I think it was a show, and that's where these kind of images came from, was from the show, just kind of from the book there. But I don't know. It bothers me that the victims were found that way, and then we have these images of Bryan attending this seminar. He's got the book in his lap. He's one of the few men there, so what was his interest there with the book? And I don't know, it could be nothing. It's just something that I noticed that stood out to me that is similar to the way the victims were found. You can't deny that. The victims were found in one bed. Could Bryan have been trying to play out something? Yeah, the timing of the plates, that's a good point, Angel. Yeah, it's a lot to explain, Sasha. There's a whole it's a pretty um, powerful book from what I've heard, and they actually uh, will will study it in higher education classes and things like that. So like I said, I'm going to check it out. Just read through it. I looked at page 118. We talked about that in my last live. I didn't see anything there. I looked, for anything that might could have been underlined. You know, that book was taken that they said had an underlining, but I don't think that was the book. Yeah, Pisces. You know, it's possible. Now, the Pisces thing, I think that a lot of that stems from those pictures we've seen of the girls holding hands and being really close and things like that. Now, I did read a little bit more about the sorority, and I think there's actually in the Alpha Phi sorority, there's a saying that it says something about hand in hand or something like that. And I almost wonder if some of those pictures, especially with the sorority girls where they're all kind of in a line and they're all kind of holding hands, could be just kind of a form of sisterhood, right, within the sorority. I don't know if it necessarily means there was a sexual relationship between the two. Now, somebody from the outside looking in could perceive it that way, definitely. Whether it's true or not, who knows? Yeah. And that's hard to talk about too, right? Nobody wants to accuse anybody of anything or anything like that, and go down that road, right, of accusing the victims and things like that. So it's something, but it could definitely have played into a motive or something. If somebody from the outside looking in perceived it a certain way. Yeah, Jaded says other sorority will hold hands. I think it's something to do with that. Um, and I know Kaylee and Maddie, I mean, they've been friends since childhood, and whatever their interests are as far as that goes, I think they're friends, right, before anything. And just like you would with somebody of the opposite sex, if you've been friends with them since childhood, you might not want to go to that level in a relationship, right? So I think they were friends before anything. And so I kind of doubt that they were in a romantic relationship at any time. But I don't think it's a bad thing to point out and say, hey, could it have been this? There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I didn't see that, Pisces. I'll have to take a look at that. Yeah, I didn't catch that. I watched that video, but I'll check again. Yeah, that was a disturbing one, Clockwork Orange. I agree. Yeah, the shows it's a little graphic, and I had to look at the affidavit too really quick. I was looking at this earlier. Yeah, Pisces. I get what you're saying. Yeah, you have to look at all the angles, and you're not the only person who I think we've all noticed it, but yeah, I just that's why when I was reading about the sorority and I read that part, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Why they might pose the way they do and things. So. Yeah, Mothership. Kaylee maybe being on a dating site. We don't know. Um, she was on and off with her boyfriend Jack. Would she have jumped to a dating site right away? Would she need to jump to a dating site? I don't know. Maybe for fun. Younger people these days probably use those things more. Um, she probably wouldn't have any difficulty, meeting somebody not on an app. And she did have a lot going on, but could have definitely been on a site, even just not even a dating site, right? Even just Snapchat or something like that, and they could have come cross paths. Yeah, it was like a at the Caroline. It was at the class at Northwestern or Northampton University. It was something they put on where she came in and lectured. Yep. I keep saying class, but yeah, it was like a or a seminar, but it's like a class. Yep. Yeah, it's hard to say who the target was still. I think that's definitely one of the mysteries here. So here in the affidavit, I was looking at this earlier. And I was kind of reading through here where the description of what Dylan saw. Because I think that's one of the more significant parts here is the witness statements. They've since released the name of the person who gave them a ride home. That person did an interview a while back. So it does say DM and BF both made statements during interviews. So they did interview both Dylan and Bethany separately. Which would make sense. They were home by 2, but sleep in their rooms by 4. And then we all know that Xana, we think, was awake around 4. And they did identify the DoorDash driver who reported the information, so they did look into that person. So Dylan said she went to bed at approximately 4 a.m. So we don't know if it was 4, right? 3:55. It could have been, but about 4 o'clock, she says she went to sleep in her bedroom. Actually, no, it says that she went to bed. We don't know what time she went to bed. It was at 4 o'clock that she was woken up. So she could have gone to bed at 3 in the morning and been laying there an hour. She could have gone to bed at 3:45. We don't quite know what time, but it says everybody was asleep or in their rooms by 4. And then Dylan says she went to sleep in her bedroom and she was awoken approximately 4 a.m. And she thought it was Kaylee playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. So I definitely think she heard Murphy moving around. Why would she say she thought it was the dog if she had only heard Kaylee running around, right? Yeah. So I do think she heard Murphy. And then it says a short time later, she heard who she thought was Kaylee say, "There's someone here." So we know for a fact somebody encountered or saw Bryan. Somebody said there's someone here. Somebody saw him in the house. Whether it was Kaylee or Xana, one of those two saw Bryan. So she was woken up at 4. She heard the noise, and then it says a short time later. So how many minutes went by from 4 until when she heard Kaylee say there's someone here? So she heard maybe Kaylee getting up, moving around, Murphy moving around. And then Kaylee walks out and then sees Bryan and says there's someone here. So could that have been just, now we say approximately 4 a.m. They did say on, the vehicle was seen like closer to 4:05. So say it's like 4:05, 4:06, right in that window where this is happening. So it's probably closer to, the vehicle, I think was seen about 4:05 or something like that, parking, 4:05 parking. Where is that here? Yeah, so 4:04 a.m. So suspect vehicle 1 enters the area at 4:04. Okay, so Dylan woke up at approximately 4, so it could have been 4:05, right? Could have been a little bit after 4. But basically she woke up because she heard Kaylee and Murphy upstairs. And then a short time after hearing that noise, somebody says there's someone here. But then it says it could have been Xana because the TikTok app was being used at approximately 4:12. So let's say Dylan woke up at 4:05 or 4:06 when she heard something. A short time later, a minute or a couple minutes later, somebody says there's someone here. But you see what I'm saying? Like this window of like maybe 4:05, 4:06. How long would it have taken Bryan to sneak in that back sliding door? Maybe he gets in and gets upstairs about 4:07 or 4:08. Dylan hears noise up there. Then she hears Kaylee say there's someone here right around 4:12. So 4:12, could that have been when, Bryan was discovered in the house? Somebody said there's someone here, and then they reference it could have been Xana because she was awake at 4:12. So from, say, 4:08, say Bryan entered the home at 4:08 and went to Maddie's room and was in Maddie's room for a couple of minutes, and then Murphy heard something, Kaylee got up, and then encountered Bryan at about 4:12. Or, could the encounter upstairs could have started maybe at 4:06, 4:07. Kaylee encounters them upstairs, and then Bryan comes downstairs and Xana says there's someone here. Who do you guys think said there's someone here? Do you think it was Kaylee or Xana or somebody else? Put in the comments who you think said there's someone here. Dylan says she thought it was Kaylee, but the affidavit says that based off of the forensics, she was also awake about 4:12. So she must have been unaware, right? Unaware of what was happening if she was just using TikTok. Xana. Most people say Xana. KJ says Kaylee. One vote for Kaylee. So what do you think about, for the Xana votes, the fact that Dylan says she heard who she thought was Kaylee? So do you think she's just mistaken, or do you think she would recognize Kaylee's voice? It's kind of important, right? Who said that? Who saw him? Who said there's someone here? Was it Kaylee? Did that happen upstairs? Or did that happen after it all happened upstairs and then it was on his way out? And that would make sense, right? If it was on his way out and then somebody encountered him, he may stop and attack those people. Or even if maybe they said there's someone here and they tried to stop him, and then he attacked the other two. But I think it's important to answer that question. Was it Kaylee or Xana? Or it sounds like it was a female voice. It probably would have been pretty clear if it was a male voice, because they described that down here, right? A male voice. So it had to be Kaylee, Xana. I mean, maybe Maddie. If Dylan's mistaking Kaylee for Xana, could she have mistaken Kaylee for Maddie? Yeah, HK, I think I lean toward that as well, that she heard Kaylee. Just because I think she would recognize her voice. But it is interesting that law enforcement is pointing out that she wasn't sure, and it could have also been Xana. That makes me think that it wasn't super clear, right? So it could have been further away. If it were Xana, she's a little closer to Dylan's room, so it might have been more clear. So the confusion also leans me to think that it might be Kaylee. Yeah, very different voices, I would think. Well, I think, Caroline, the point is trying to figure it out. You know, was it KG a little bit deeper? Yeah. Well, I think, Caroline, part of my channel is also trying to understand not only who did it, but how it happened as well, how it unfolded. Because I think that could also help answer questions on who did it. But yeah, I agree, Harley. Her door was probably closed. So then she says she looked out of her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about being someone in the house. So she heard somebody say there's someone here. She looks out. She doesn't see anybody. And then it says Dylan says she opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Xana's room. Now they don't say how much time elapsed from when she looked out of her bedroom the first time, and then when how long went by until she heard the crying and then she opened her door a second time. So it also kind of supports that it would have been Kaylee who said there's someone here, because if Dylan looked out after she heard that and she didn't see anything, the it was probably upstairs where the perpetrator was, and whoever said there's someone here, if they were upstairs, Dylan would have looked out and not seen anybody. If they were in the living room, she would have seen him right there when she looked out that first time, right? And then the other thing here, it says she opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernodle's room. So I think when we hear the word crying, we imagine like a little kid crying. But crying could also mean crying in pain, right? Or crying out. We don't know, you know, what type of crying it was. It could have been an attack, right? If she was getting attacked and kind of crying in the attack, but I don't know if it would have been like Xana sitting, like, you know what I mean? Like if she was sitting on her bed crying. I don't know if that's the type of crying. And then she heard the voice say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." So if Dylan looked out of her bedroom and she didn't see anything, and then she shut the door, and then the attacks happened on Xana and Ethan after she shut the door, she may have heard those attacks happening. It just says that she opened her door when she heard what she thought was crying. It doesn't say she didn't hear anything before that. She may have heard somebody come downstairs and an argument ensue and an attack happened, and then she opened her door again when she heard what she thought was crying in Kernodle's room, and then she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." It doesn't really say how much time passed, and you know what happened in that period of time from not seeing anything, shuts the door, and then all of a sudden is hearing crying. So she had to have heard something, I think, when she shut that door, from the time she shut the door to the time that the crying started. So 4:17 is when the neighbor's security camera captured the audio. So there's a really good chance that the attacks were happening on Ethan and Xana at about 4:17. I think it's plenty of time. I'm just curious about kind of how it unfolded. Yeah, she just got the DoorDash. I wonder though. I kind of feel like she got the DoorDash. She went in her room and was probably eating. Probably was distracted on TikTok. You know, just relaxing when the attacks were happening upstairs. And then maybe after the alert happened of somebody saying there's someone here, she was more aware, and then that could have been when Bryan was coming down. Now, if we listen to that audio that's been released, and every time I mention the audio, everybody says, "Oh, it's been debunked." Well, we don't know for sure if it's debunked or not. But if you listen to that audio, there is that part of the audio where it sounds like somebody might even be yelling, like, "Get off of me" or something. And part of me wonders if, Kaylee could have said there's someone here. She was attacked. Bryan came downstairs, encountered Ethan. Ethan tried to grab a hold of him or hold him down, and then Bryan attacked him. And then Xana would have been crying in that moment, right, when that was happening, and seeing Ethan getting attacked and crying, and then maybe was getting attacked herself. Then Dylan heard the crying, and then that's when the perpetrator left, right? That's just one scenario that I've thought about. Yeah, it's been evaluated so many times. The PCA's, I think true in my opinion. If you're gonna say, if we're gonna say the PCA is not true, you're essentially saying the extreme the other way, and you're saying law enforcement is completely incompetent, and it has just completely fabricated this whole thing, right? And all of these people, the witnesses, are all in on this. If you're going to say that it's not true, right? This is about as true as it gets as far as looking at the case. This is the most real evidence that we have on what happened. Exactly, HK. They can't speculate, but they can redact, right? They only have to release small pieces. And that was my point about, we don't know when it says a short time later. We don't know, and we don't know if there was something else said that happened before a short time later, right? There could have been, oh yeah, I heard a struggle, and then it goes into a short time later, she heard crying. They can cut out whatever they want. Agree, KJ. You have multiple police agencies. And why Bryan? If you're going to set someone up, why Bryan? Why are they out to get Bryan? Why would you pick a criminology student, somebody like him, that's going to create a frenzy of attention if you're going to be framing somebody? I really don't think they were asleep. I think some were asleep when things started, but I think that we know for a fact that somebody was awake. Somebody said there's someone here. So we know for a fact one person saw somebody, and then we also know for a fact Xana was awake and got a DoorDash delivery and was on TikTok. I really think they have the right guy. I think he acted alone, and I think they have the right person. That said, if tomorrow we look and there was, some new piece of evidence that proves that he could be innocent, you have to look at that, right? It's not, a lot of people say, oh, he's innocent until proven guilty. It's okay to have an opinion at this point, right? And then you reach a final conclusion at some point, but right now, yeah, I think he's guilty. I think they have the right person, and everything that I've been able to figure out about the case points to it being him. I would love to see a piece of evidence that said otherwise. That would make it very interesting, right? Marietta says thinks all of them were in the kitchen. Interesting. See ya, Angel. Yeah, Harla, it's a great point. Nobody ever really answers, why they why would they set up Bryan? Hey, what's going on here? I think there was noise though. Um, I don't think it really says anywhere in the PCA that it was silent. I think that it just leaves things out that they don't really have to tell us that the witnesses may have heard. I think that that would be key information that they would want to keep under wraps, right? I don't think they would want that out to the public if they didn't have to, explaining exactly what was heard, because there could be key things in there that they are still using in their investigation. Like when um, they'll be questioning somebody and or they'll be investigating the murder of somebody, and there will be a signature piece of evidence that they don't tell anybody about, and then that way they can actually validate if like a witness comes in and says something, they can use that stuff that hasn't been released to validate if it's true or not. So they'll keep things held back on purpose while they're investigating. They're not going to release things that they don't have to, especially in a PCA. We're only seeing that just because they're obligated to show a little bit. Yeah, Rosea. Um, I agree. Yeah, with Xana maybe being the last one potentially. Maybe both of them fighting him. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, so housewife, you're 50-50, some DNA in his car or apartment. Remember, they also have an animal hair. I don't think Bryan owned any animals. They did say they found what they thought was a dog hair, so that could be big. If What do you think, everyone? Do you think if they found Murphy's hair in his apartment, that's a big deal? I guess it depends on what the defense is going to be. Because I think if the defense sees that that's going to be submitted as evidence that it's going to be a hair from Murphy, they're going to have to address that in their explanation. So they would almost have to go with the idea that Bryan was in the house at some time. Yeah, no weapon found because I think he took it with him. He probably got rid of it. So, hey, Pete, you said they ran his dad's DNA within 24 hours of when? Are you saying within 24 hours of the murder? I don't know if no weapon means the wrong person. They did say early on. I think there was one expert who had mentioned, they don't necessarily need the weapon. They they can they can prove the crime was committed by somebody without the weapon. That I think happens quite often in criminal cases. Yeah, so yeah, they got it from the trash, right? Okay, that's what I thought you might have been referring to. So Pete Savage mentioned they got his DNA within 24 hours. So yeah, they just got it from his trash, right? And then submitted that, and it came back as a match. Yeah, simulation mentioned. Yeah, I mean transfer of hair could definitely happen, right? But I think, if it was just that, if it was like, okay, yeah, what do we got on Bryan? Oh, we got the hair from the animal, and they could focus on that one piece and dispute that, sure. But it's not just one, right? It's all of these pieces pointing to Bryan. It's they're not all coincidences, right? He's gonna have an answer for every little piece. He's gonna have an excuse. Okay, why'd you turn your phone off? Why were you caught on camera? Why did you go to Albertsons the day after and buy these items? Remember, they know what he bought at Albertsons the day after. Why did your cell phone ping at the same place that your car was at on camera captured at the same exact time? That's the other thing with these cell phone pings. Technology has come a long way, everybody. It's not like it was in the past where they can say, "Oh no, that can only tell if something's within 10 miles of it." They can pinpoint that now down to the direction that the phone, what direction the phone was from the tower, and they can narrow it down pretty close compared to what they used to be able to do. And so that's the other thing is they have cell phone pings, and then they have the car going past a certain location, and then you have Bryan's phone pinging off of the cell phone tower in that same location at the same time. So not only do they have a white Elantra, they have Bryan's phone pinging there. They have essentially Bryan in the white Elantra. So he's going to have to explain that away. And then you have the DNA on the knife sheath. And then, like I said, the next day he's down at Albertsons. We don't know what he bought at Albertsons or Walmart or whatever it was. We don't know what he bought, but they do. I'm pretty sure they know what he bought. And if it was a bunch of cleaning items, for example, well, that's another thing you have to explain. So it's not just one thing. It's not one piece of evidence that they just have to say, well, it's because of this. Well, it's all of it. It's not just a coincidence that all of these things are pointing to one person. Yeah, Alien. I mean, and that's the game, right? They're gonna have to just so Alien Dog says wrong car, pings are shady and not accurate, right? And so that's definitely always going to be the defense's argument. Well, anything the prosecution introduces as evidence, the defense, of course, is going to say, no, that's not accurate. Oh, that's not valid. Or, oh, that testing process doesn't work, right? That's how it works, right? Both sides present it and have their experts kind of state their claims on if it's valid or not, and then the jury is going to have to decide who they believe or what they believe based off of what they see. And that's why it's really important when you do have an expert, it's somebody who can explain the evidence in a way that's simple but also makes sense, right? You don't want to over confuse the jury with all of this stuff, and that's what the defense likes to do. They like to overload juries with information, and then it can create doubt. So, for example, the genealogy results that they were requesting, they wanted to get all of this data, and then they want to have to go. And so, when you have a DNA person up there testifying, if you can just kind of jumble that all up, it makes it a lot easier to create some doubt. But if you have DNA evidence being explained by somebody who's right focused to the point and it's very clear on how the DNA can get there and how it's accurate, the jury is going to be much more apt to believe them, right? So that's what's going to happen in the trial. There's going to be experts on both sides arguing that. Yeah, it's late night. True crime time, late night. I just have to get on when I can, and I'm going to try to schedule some earlier ones as well, but it was Sunday night. I just thought I'd jump on and figured there were some people out there hanging out. So I know we have some viewers in Australia and Canada and Thailand. It's awesome to see everybody. Yeah, so Sandy says, why do you think they were taking photos at the top of the stairs? I think there's a lot more evidence than we know about in the house. I think that they haven't told us about a great portion of what they have, and footprints, you know, things like that. I think there's more than we know about. But just be careful, out there with a lot of, it's great to look at the different angles, and it's good to speculate too, but just be careful with some of the stuff going around, and try to at least stick to the legal documents and the what's actually unfolding until something real comes to fruition out there with the rumors. But yeah, I thought the judge did a good job in the last hearing, compared to the first one, and he explained he wasn't feeling well, and he messed up, and he definitely, I thought, was a lot sharper in the last hearing. I don't know if is he the guy now? Is he going to be the judge through the entire trial in October? Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen between now and then. He did do a much better job, though. Just keeping an eye on the chat here too. Yeah, I wonder where law enforcement might have looked here for evidence that he could have disposed of. I wonder, you know, when he disposed of it. If he disposed of it that night, I think that's probably his best chance, when his phone was off, that they wouldn't find it. But if he held on to anything and he got rid of it after the fact, there's a lot of cameras out there. There's a lot of data they could get off of his phone, GPS wise. Even just where areas where he maybe turned off his phone, they could be looking. So they might have more insights about where his route was, right, when he, after the crime, and where he could have potentially disposed of evidence. There could be a camera footage at a car wash, for example, of him cleaning out his car, that they could have found, something in the trash, or something like that from. They have him also in Pennsylvania, a few days before he was arrested. They were trailing him, and so they had him, surveilled at that point. So if he was getting rid of anything during that period of time when he was being surveilled, or something like that, they could have more. They may have found something. I really think that car is going to be key. Finding some DNA in the car, I think they most likely will. I don't know how easy it would be to clean up everything. There's some nooks and crannies and things like that, and his dad was coming into town. He was still finishing up school. He probably cleaned it to some extent thoroughly, but I think to really get rid of everything, you'd have to take it in and get it like detailed somewhere, right? So it's going to be interesting to see if they find any DNA evidence from the car. Yeah, he's a little bit relaxed, Harlot. That was one thing I didn't like about the judge. Was, this is, he. It just seemed like he was. I understand he was just trying to be lighthearted and friendly and things like that, but kind of the jokes and stuff. But it is a serious situation, right, for everybody who's involved. I think that's why people were upset that he botched the names early on. It's because, like, come on, get the names of these victims right. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, I'll definitely be going live more now that I'm all set up here, so. Yeah, Raphael, L on Raphael. Yeah, they definitely have chemicals that can pick up trace and things like that. Yeah, lots of education, Caroline. That's what makes this case a little so crazy. He had so much going for him. Yeah, I think he's gonna leave the gag order based off of the way he was acting, Harlot. I think it would take a lot. I think from the sound of it, he was telling Shannon Gray that they have a little more freedom than what they thought they had. So it's possible that that could have already settled it, and they'll probably just leave the gag order in place. Yeah, he was in cleanup mode when the cops pulled him over for sure. Even before that, I think. Yep. Yeah, the autopsy, Caroline, that's definitely one that will answer a lot of questions on, I think, what happened in the house, right? How things unfolded, and that might offer more insight about the order of the order that the victims were targeted. Could answer more questions about how things happened. Yeah, Rosea. So I'll tell a story too that kind of reminds me of this case. And like when I talk about Dylan and the idea that somebody could be in shock or maybe not be thinking clearly. So when I was a kid, I think I was about 10. I was home alone, and we lived in a pretty rural area, and it was our neighbors on either side of us were rarely home, and then we had another neighbor who was about in our on the backyard side of us but we had about 5 acres between their house and our house, and I was home alone one afternoon. And like I said, I was about 10 or 11, and somebody called us on the phone. Now, we didn't have cell phones back then, just our house phone, and this guy called me on the phone, and I answered the phone, just a kid not knowing. Well, he started saying all these like bad things to me, right? So I hung the phone up. Well, the phone rang again a little while later, and I answered the phone again, and the guy said he was coming over to my house, right? And so I freaked out. I panicked. Well, I hang up the phone. Well, I could have just picked up the phone and called 911, right? Well, I hung up the phone, and I'm kind of pacing around the house, like kind of nervous. Well, I look out my front door window, and there's a car coming down my driveway. This like black Trans Am vehicle coming down our driveway. So now I'm really scared, and we had this basement room that was down below my bedroom, and there was actually a ladder. It was kind of like a hidden room, and there was this ladder that went down there. So I'm a kid, and I'm not sure what to do. So I ran down into that room, and I sat there and I was hiding, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I gonna do? And so there's this period of time where I was sitting there, and then I said, well, screw this. I'm not just gonna sit here for him to find me. And so there was a door that led out of that room that I was hiding in, and I took off out that door, and I ran to my neighbor, who I didn't even know these people. The only thing I knew about them was that one of the girls at my school lived there, and it was her house. And so I ran to that house, and I told them what happened, and I stayed at their house until my parents got home. So when I talk about things like that can happen to people, it can. I could have easily just picked up the phone and called the police, but you panic, right? And you don't think clearly in situations. Now imagine something like that where there's a quadruple murder unfolding in your house, how you might panic and, not be thinking clearly, and it can happen, right? And so anyway, that the card was gone, and nothing ever happened of it. But it is possible for people, again, the phone was right there. You can call 911, and when you're in that type of mindset, you don't think clearly. So that was just kind of your answer, Rosea, to sharing some of your experiences too, and how this case kind of reminds you of some of that. The other thing I was thinking about too, with how the crime may have happened, is when they teach students nowadays in schools, when a school shooting happens, right, and there's kind of a lockdown, and so, for example, if a crime were happening in that house that was similar to a school shooting environment, like where you have a mass murderer going around attacking people, it's also possible that these girls could have been scared and locked themselves in and sat for a while in fear, again, panicking and being in shock, and we don't know. Those hours after the murders are a mystery, but there's a lot of possibilities. I think that I also think it's possible that they didn't wait all of those hours, that they left the house and maybe went and sought help, and there's something that happened there that we don't know about. They called somebody that it just hasn't been released, right? Maybe they did call in, and that report early on is inaccurate, and they've figured out what happened in those hours since then. Or maybe it's just innocent. Maybe they just ran for help, and the people who were helping them did what they did, and there's a valid explanation to it. We don't know. Well, I really hope we find out in the trial about that window of time. I hope they don't just kind of gloss over it. I wonder if the defense will even focus in on that. It'll depend on, I guess, what their defense strategy is going to be. Yeah, Pete, get him a sword. Yeah, Pete, another crazy story. When I lived at that house, I was walking to school, and a truck pulled over in front of me, and these two guys were in this little pickup truck, and they were trying to get me to come over to the car. They were asking me for directions and stuff, and luckily I had enough wits about me that I took off the other way. But that was right around the same time. Probably something about the area we were in, I guess. Yeah, Harlot. We don't know. The other thing that really, I think bugs me is too, is in the affidavit, how it talks about a forensic review of Bethany and Dylan's phone leads them to believe the murders occurred between 4 and 4:25. And so whatever that forensic review was of Bethany and Dylan's phone was, could they have been communicating, I wonder, after the fact through text messages or something like that. Bradley Knight, good to see you, man. Welcome. Just hanging out. It's my Sunday night, Bradley, but it's all right. Yeah, Pete, that's a possibility. Kind of went into lockdown mode for a period of time. Um, Depending on what they heard and what unfolded that we don't know about. Yeah, so here's the, let me grab this view of the house here. Take a look at that. Actually, let's do this real quick. Yeah, night, Pete. Yeah, I think we're going to wrap up here, everybody. I'll be back on tomorrow evening, so keep an eye out for that. It's live. I appreciate everyone. Shoot me an email or a message in the comments if you want to talk about anything in the case, or any suggestions for a video or a live to discuss. Always looking for everybody's ideas. You always have really good insights. But like I said, I'll be back on tomorrow night. I appreciate you jumping on and joining me tonight. I'll get that movie figured out, and we'll see if we can get that streaming for you. Have a good night, everybody. See ya, Pink, Caroline, Angel, Pete, Jaded, Harlot, Rosea, Fuzzy, Pisces, Veronica, Dawn. Appreciate you all being here. Housewife, Alien Dog, Caroline, as always, appreciate you being here, sharing your thoughts. Have a good night, everyone.